Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, April 13th, and we are here live with the Educator Collaborative's 21st gathering. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you are tuning in live right now or you might be watching this sometime in the future. Well, first of all, I'm moving some things around on my screen off to the side here, but also I am Christopher Lehman. I'm the founding director of the Educator Collaborative. This organization, we just had our 10th year anniversary. We're a decade old. We are now going to elementary school on the bus by ourselves. We have been hosting the Ed Collab gathering twice a year, every year since the very beginning. And we are just so happy and honored to have all of you here with us this morning. So I'd like to start off with some how this day tends to run, a few announcements, then I'll have some opening remarks, and then coming up very soon, we'll go right over to our opening keynote. So if you have joined before or if you haven't before, here's a few things to know about how this always totally free, no registration, gift to the educator community runs here at the Ed Collab. So first, something new for us this year. Many educators, I know myself included, are mourning the very weird and slow changes and the end of what felt like a very active educator community on what formerly was called Twitter. The Twitter community was huge and robust, and that was the place for many gatherings. We'd always connect and chat, message, tag each other during a day like today. For many of us, we have left or are using Twitter a lot less for all of the horrible reasons that it has become a challenging place. So this year, we have something new that's actually going on right now. Hi, everyone in the chat room. We have on Facebook, we have a Facebook group made just for connecting over all things the Ed Collab. And right now we have an active chat going. You can join our viewing party chat. Any educator, anyone at all that would like to join, just come on over and join. You can use that QR code on your screen or go to facebook.com/groups/the Ed Collab. And we are chatting in real time right now. Like I see Jessica saying hi. Hi, Jessica, in the chat. So please feel free to join us there. It's a way where we can connect, talk, network during all of today's incredible sessions and keynotes. The Ed Collab Gathering is a totally free K-12 literacy conference, always put on by educators for educators. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how you could navigate around today. There are also multiple ways that you could be tuning in and viewing this morning's session. So the best place to go is to our conference website. Some of you might be watching this on YouTube right now, or you might have found this as a link on social media somewhere and you just clicked it and you're playing a video. The best place to navigate the entire day is at gathering.theedcollab.com. And there you can see along this top menu here, there are all sorts of different links you can click on. You can visit the full agenda, go to the opening keynote. Oh, here we go. Go to the opening keynote, closing keynote, click this to go to workshops, and lots of other things you can do as well too. When you are scrolling through and looking at sessions you want to attend, so for example, when Beth and Stephanie and her colleagues' sessions come up after the keynote, if you'd like to watch either one, you just click one of these links at the bottom. If you click watch here, you will stay on our conference website and you will go to a page dedicated just for that workshop. There you can see bios of the presenters, and you also can watch the video right there. If you are watching on the beach somewhere, or you've taken your kids to soccer practice and you're sitting in the car, or if you're watching somewhere remote and it's easier for you to watch on YouTube, you can just click the watch on YouTube link and it will do as it says. It'll head right over to YouTube. We have the entire day's sessions all organized in a playlist. If you find us on youtube.com/theedcollab, just go to playlists, and from playlists you can find Spring 2024. It is the only playlist that says watch on this playlist. You'll see it at the bottom of the screen. In the background of where I am right now, over on television in my living room, I am also watching myself talking to you, and I'm watching from our Apple TV using YouTube. So there are many ways that you can join today. So this conference is and always has been, and we intend for it always to be, totally free with no registration. It's our gift to the educator community. But what we do ask, and we've asked since the very beginning, is if today you feel inspired by something you hear or see, if you feel energized in a way that you really needed right now, and you're going to take something back to your classroom, whatever it may be, if you can hop on over to our charity link, gathering.theedclab.com/charity, and there you can find all of our adopted charities for the day. We ask our keynotes to adopt a charity for us. And then we ask you, the viewers, if you feel inspired, if you feel joyful, we ask you to pay the joy forward. So think if you were to see this amazing lineup of speakers and you were to pay a registration, or you were maybe to fly to a conference and pay for a hotel even, or even if it's just a between session cup of coffee, what might you normally pay, or even just paying for coffee on a day like today? You don't have to pay us, so instead consider paying that joy forward. So our three adopted charities for today: Samira, our opening keynote, she has adopted We Need Diverse Books. If you go to gathering.theedclab.com/charity, if you head over there, you can find the direct link to We Need Diverse Books, and you can donate right on their website. You don't donate to us, you donate straight to them. Then our closing keynote this afternoon, Tracy and Maria, they have adopted for us the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival and the National Writing Project. Again, please go over to our charity page. You can also find that on, if you're on our website, at the very top of the website page. Where is it? Adopted Charities right there, or there's a little button there. And so for all of those, you can link over to that page. You'll learn about those charities that our keynotes have adopted, and there's links you can go directly to their site, learn more, and donate. If paying the joy forward financially is not something that feels possible for you right now, please consider all the many ways that you can donate your time and energy and volunteer to take the joy and inspiration that you feel today and pay it forward to amazing charities that are doing incredible and necessary work. So before introducing our keynote in about 7 minutes, I have a few opening remarks to get us in the mindset for today. So back in September, we have our gathering is always 2 times out of the year, every September, every April. So back in September was our last gathering, our fall 2023 gathering. It happened in the middle of September. And then shortly after that, leading into October, inside of my family, we faced a mental health crisis. For the sake of the internet going on forever, I won't share full details here, though if we've been connected in my life, you know some of the details. But inside of my family, we faced something that we hadn't before, and it completely rocked our world. Every priority that I thought I had to completely change just to help to care for not only the person, but also all of us, and myself included. Everything that we thought we understood about how our lives were going in a moment in October completely flipped around. And that process lasted several months, and everything felt different. And the reason why I'm sharing that bit of my life, one, is just to say, if you have someone in your life who's facing a mental health emergency, please do reach out to me. I would love to connect with you and share our own journey. And that is because during a time that felt incredibly impossible, I mean, truly, I have been through very hard things in my life. And I'm trying not to tear up in front of you, but this was truly the hardest thing I have ever had to do and ever had to be a part of. And the thing that helped get me through it was community. It was finding other people that have had similar experiences, or just connecting to services, or just being able to say to friends and colleagues and districts that I work with who all have been incredibly lovely. My heart goes out to all of you who have been such a huge support this year. Thank you. Um, by being able to say, I'm struggling, and having people say back, take my hand, or I've been in that too, and let me tell you what the next steps of that feel like. That sense of community saved me. It saved my family, and it helped us get through. And I will say, for our story, there is another side. Things are improving a lot. The emergency that we were in is now stabilized, and there's still stuff to figure out, but we're in a much different place. But I 100% owe that to community. If I wasn't able to say, which is hard for me, to say I'm struggling, I need help, I can't do this thing. If I wasn't able to say that, it also wouldn't have offered others the chance to say, I'm here for you too, I can help. So first, before I move ahead, you likely know, but if you don't, please put in your phone 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is a national, it's like 911. Every single state in the United States, you can dial 988 and you can get connected to mental health services. Those are both for an individual in crisis, but also anyone else who's around that person or just needs help and needs to know. So please make sure you have that in your phone and you have that front and center. But in addition, I share this story to say the story of education right now is a lot of people feeling tremendous burnout and fear and uncertainty, and the number of people saying, I'm telling people to not go into education that want to go into education, or some of you are pre-service educators. I have people in my program who are saying, I don't know that I want to do this. Many of you are close to retirement and you're just saying, I have to figure out a way how to get out soon. There is so much stress and fear and anxiety for all of the many, many reasons floating around us in education right now. And there's a way where that can feel like the hardest thing you've ever done. There's a way where you can look back on why you chose this profession to begin with and ask yourself, why am I still here? And so I want to say to you, the hardest thing I ever went through got better because of community. I survived, and at times barely survived, but made it through because of community. And the same is true for us in education now. And one place that, or one thing that I know feels hard about those connections are, like I mentioned, Twitter earlier. For me, I felt such robust connections in education on that former platform, where when things were hard, we could all connect with one another. That was a place I went. Some of you go to TikTok, some of you go to other places. But for those of us that really loved Educator Twitter, I know right now also feels like, where did it go? Where did my community go? What's happening? Um, and so one thing I want to point out is that, yes, I miss Twitter too, but there are so many groups and ways that we can be connected. And so my message to you this morning is, whether it's personal or it's professional, if you are feeling alone and disconnected, find your people and know that your people don't know you need help unless you ask. If you say, I feel like I'm disconnected, can you help me find groups? So even pre-Twitter, some of these groups were forming community. The Nerdy Book Club had community at an NCTE conference, started there, and then had a blog, and then got active on social media. But they were and still are an active community of educator readers. Two writing teachers, which now is well more than just two writing teachers, but started out just as a blog and community built around there. And now they have podcasts and lots of connections, and there are multiple two writing teachers writing for two writing teachers. It's a way that writing teachers are connected. NCTE and other conferences, state conferences, Hi Texas, Hi Illinois, Hi Wisconsin, Hi Connecticut, all of the state writing conferences have small conferences, and there's large national conferences, places for us to connect. Educolor, that started as an online community through Twitter and then grew from there, that connects educators of color to feel connected, feel affirmed, to fight through the messes together and celebrate the joys. And then, of course, here at the Educator Collaborative, things like the Ed Collab Gathering. Find your people when things feel hard. And remember, your people may not know you need help unless you ask. It can sometimes be the bravest thing in the world to say, I need some help, but that's what gets us through. And we will get through. Our children need us. Our districts need us. Public education needs us. We need to be connected so we can fight on. So please find your people virtually, find your people in your local reading communities and conferences. Find your people because they will help you get through the times that feel tough. So now I'd like to move over to introducing our opening keynote. Samira Ahmed is a New York Times bestselling author. She is a former educator as well. Once an educator, always an educator. Actually, this morning in the green room when we were talking with each other, we all agreed, we're like, we're teachers. We can make this 5 minutes. We can make it 45. We will find a way to make it done. You can find Samira on social media at SamIam with those underscores. You can see it on your screen there, and also at samiraahmed.com. She is the author of many, many books. I will say behind me here, I have several that I love. Her young adult series, Amira and Hamza. I don't even remember how I got it, Samira, but somehow I have an advanced copy of Love, Hate, and Other Filters, which is full of sticky notes everywhere because I not only read it all the time, but I did and continue to bring it to school after school after school. The number of students that I have enjoyed reading this with. One thing that I just absolutely adore about Amira's work is not only the voice inside of her work, but the way that she creates narratives, has interesting ways to intertwine narratives together. There's such heart in her characters, and in the midst of what feel like impossible moments, I guess it connects to what I was saying earlier, times where things feel harder than they've ever been, communities come together to help one another, people connect, and it's just a heartbeat in Samira's work. Samira also, around all of her young adult writing, also wrote the Ms. Marvel series. So you can see that book there, and she's contributed to a number of anthologies. So I am just so, so delighted, and let me stop sharing my screen here to have you join us this morning, Samira. Thank you very much for spending your time with us, and thanks for all that you do for readers and educators.
Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks for having me. You can hear me, right?
Yes, yes, thank
Okay,
you.
good. I'm always like technical glitches can happen. After listening to your opening remarks, I was like, I'm going to change my entire lesson plan right now. Um, so thank you so much for sharing that because I was in the classroom for a while, but I still feel like I am a teacher. Like I still feel connected to teachers. So this is also special for me, but also I wish we could all just be in one room all together.
Yes, yes,
I
right.
know it's like so hard to be separate from each other because I don't know, like you're talking about community, and my mind is just like, yes, I'm going to change my entire keynote to be about community. And like, how, you know how it is when you see like one thing and you're like, I'm completely pivoting. But thank you so much for
Excellent.
sharing
Yes,
that. And
thank
also
you.
for inviting me to be part of the community this morning. Hi, everyone. So I'm Samira Ahmed. And like Chris said, I used to be a former English teacher. And so um, my heart is just very, very big for educators because you're my people. And, um, I'm glad that we could spend this day together. And I thank you for having me and also still making me feel like I'm part of the education community. Every time I go to a conference with teachers like NCTE or when I'm invited to speak to teachers, it just it just makes me feel so good because I think even as much as I love being an author and writing for young people, none of that would have been possible without my work in the classroom and the the community that I felt with my fellow teachers and my colleagues. And like Chris was saying, I feel like right now the profession feels so much like it's under attack. You all obviously know that. So I need to start my timer because otherwise I'll go over. Sorry. I feel like classrooms and libraries are just being assaulted by hate. There's the book banners and haters, people who are telling you how to do your job, even though they've never spent 1 minute in the classroom or have never taken a single education class. I feel more and more that we're hearing these loud voices of people who essentially want to privatize and monetize our schools, people who think that somehow the school to prison pipeline is a great idea. And I'm sure it must feel exhausting and it must feel like you are so alone in this, but you're not. And I hope that's something that this day can remind you of. And so, since I've been thinking about classroom teachers so much, especially because so many teachers are reaching out to me and telling me stories of things that are happening in their classroom, I was thinking a lot recently about when I was first interviewing for my teaching jobs. And I think it was for the second job I interviewed at. I taught in the suburbs of Chicago and also in New York City public schools. So it was a very long time ago. So my memory is a little fuzzy around it. So it might have been before I interviewed for my New York City public school position. But one of the questions the interviewer asked me was, what was your worst day in the classroom? And I told a story about my worst day in student teaching. And I think, we all have this experience as being former student teachers where we, you're like bright eyed and, so excited, and you're going in there with all of your, your energy and your enthusiasm for your subject. And I honestly cannot even remember what short story I was teaching, but I taught this story and had this assignment that was completely, honestly, just way too hard for what I was teaching. And when I walked in the classroom, the class literally kind of rebelled and was like so mad at me. And we'd been having a pretty good relationship up to then. And one of the kids said my expectations weren't fair because I hadn't built enough supports to sort of get them to the place they needed to go. And I stopped right there because, of course, this kid who was at that moment really smarter than me was just essentially talking about Vygotsky, even though he had no idea who that was, and was talking about building platforms and scaffolding to get us to, where we need to work in order to get the kids to the place that we need them to be. And so I was telling the story in my interview, and I talked about how I was sort of caught flat-footed, and I was just a student teacher, but it was so important for me to listen to the kids, and so that sort of worst day where I was like, oh, this is terrible, I don't know how I'm going to possibly be a teacher, in a lot of ways sort of became the best day just by the fact that I listened to them and realized how much I still had to learn and could learn from them and from listening. And I also learned that I could totally fall on my face in the classroom, but I was still going to get up and I could learn how to pivot and I could turn things around. And I feel like that worst day, best day story is a little bit of the situation that we're in right now, because I feel like it's pretty fair to say that we in education and publishing are having a lot of worst days. We're having a lot of bad days. And it's not by lesson plans that we're creating that are sort of are beyond the scope of what our kids can do right at that minute, but it's so much because of what is being imposed upon us. And I think that is the weight of that can feel like so much, and the attacks can feel so relentless, and that's when burnout really happens, because you're just trying to get in the classroom every day. For me, I'm trying to get my stories out, and sometimes it can just feel like I just have to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to do this for another day or another semester or another year. But oftentimes when that happens to me, I actually turn to poetry. That's something that I always did when I was in the classroom and feeling that kind of way, like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And it's also National Poetry Month, so I think that's a great little segue into this. So I want to just actually share with you a poem that I wrote, because when I said I turned to poetry, I love to write poetry. I've written it since I was very young. I actually saved all my poetry from, when I was young and in high school, and it's very angst ridden and, a lot about like unrequited crushes. But it was a way that I could, you know, in a way talk to myself or listen to myself is by writing those really very terrible poems. But anyway, today I'd like to share with you this poem that I wrote for my second novel, Internment. And Internment came out in 2019, and it is a near future speculative novel, a novel set 15 minutes into the future. And it's the story of this young woman, a high school senior, who's living in this world where an authoritarian has been elected to the presidency in the United States. And just really quick as a caveat, I wrote this entire book before the Trump election. And this woman, this teen, Layla, she is living in a time where this authoritarian has risen to power and has started these exclusion laws based on fear and paranoia and bigotry, and has just started putting Muslim Americans into internment camps, illegally incarcerating them, in obviously parallels to what was happening during World War II in the United States with Japanese Americans who were illegally incarcerated. Over 100,000 of them. So in Internment, Ali Amin, who is the father of the protagonist, is a poet. Like I said, I always loved writing poetry, and sort of my secret ambition, my secret dream when I was young was to be a poet. And I did actually try to submit poetry to various places, but I didn't have a lot of luck getting it placed. I had a couple things here or there. So I always like to say that I essentially had to write a novel in order to publish my poetry, because once you write the book, they are going to publish your poetry in it. So it was kind of a long way to get there, but I did it. That to me was the easiest route to getting my poetry published. And honestly, just I haven't shared this publicly yet, but I actually recently just sold a novel in verse, which won't be coming out for a few years, but it's sort of this fulfillment of this dream that I've been working for so long. So I'm very excited about it. But in any case, this poem from Internment is called Revolution. And, it ties into the title of my talk today, talking about a revolution, which, yes, I sent that title in right after the most recent Grammys when I was watching Tracy Chapman, because I'm a Gen Xer, and that album was pivotal for me. And so was the song talking about a revolution. And so I was like, yes, I think it was like in that moment where I was like, I think Tracy Chapman has influenced more of my writing than I realized. But in any case, I wanted to share this poem with you, Revolution. Speak to me with your tongue while it is still free, while your body is still yours. Let your words travel through the air, uncontrolled, spontaneous, necessary, tumbling through clouds of dust that dim the sun until they reach my ear, and so many ears spilled onto the table, waiting. Speak the truth while it is still alive, while lips cracked and bleeding can still move. Time is beholden to neither lover nor tyrant. Say what you must. I will listen. So in the story, in Internment, some of the first people that are rounded up for illegal incarceration are academics and writers and poets. And Ali Amin, the father of the main character, this poem is what has gotten this poem in the book of poetry that it's in is what's gotten the attention of authorities and have sort of gotten him on this list of revolutionaries that are troublemakers. And so that's part of why his family's incarcerated. But this poem, like when we think about revolution, and when the authorities in internment are thinking about revolution, they're imagining like uprisings, right? And that obviously is part of revolution. We understand that through our history. But this poem about revolution isn't about taking up arms. And I realize that's also, in those lines of Tracy Chapman's song, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. And I think that that's so critical to both my work as a novelist, but also sort of, I guess, who I am or who maybe I aspire to be, because a huge part of that revolution is listening, because sometimes those voices that we're listening to, including our own, are so quiet. And, revolution is an act of change, of shifting the paradigm, dismantling privilege. It's about not giving an inch to the haters right now, and to the book banners. It's about planting our flag, and saying, like, the freedom to read and the freedom to think and the freedom to live and the freedom to love are fundamental rights for all of us, for all Americans, and certainly for the children that I believe as adults it is our duty to protect. And so when I say our kids, I don't mean just my personal kids who are living in this house. I mean all children, because I know that as educators, this is sort of foundational for us. We believe ethically and morally it is our responsibility to ensure that all children are seen and heard and believed and loved. And so often right now, they are being attacked. And a lot of my novels are about young people being forced to find their courage because of the terrible choices adults around them are making, and how they are oppressed by that, and how they use their voices to speak out against that, and how we as adults can help them be allies, can pave a way for them. And I think that so often, like I said, revolution begins by listening. Sometimes it's just that whisper, like from the Tracy Chapman song. And the first thing about it is listening to your own voice. And I think sometimes there's so much noise around us that it's easy to sort of lose sight of our own voice. And sometimes that voice inside of us can be loud. As I'm sure you can imagine, I am a loud person. Um, but sometimes those voices can be quiet. And right now, when we're facing so many attacks, there's obviously the voices inside all of us that know that, okay, book bans are totally wrong. This is what's so enraging about names like Moms for Liberty, because book bans are totally anti-freedom. They're anti-liberty. They're anti-American. And we all know that. The vast majority of Americans know that. And still, here we are in the situation where thousands and thousands of individual books are being challenged, are being banned, where teachers, librarians, authors, children are being attacked. And, I think sometimes that voice that's telling us, okay, we've got to stand up. We have to act out. We have to push back. We have to plant that flag for freedom and for our kids. And we cannot give an inch to these haters. Sometimes that voice can be drowned out by like very real fears, right? And, fears of being fired, attacked, being doxxed, being called horrible names, being threatened. And I've spoken to, over the last 3 years, so many teachers and librarians and students who have all faced this, school board members who actually try to fight this, who are also facing those same things. So I'm not dismissing those fears at all. They're real, and that's another voice in ourselves that we need to listen to. But at the same time, we have to figure out a way to navigate this current situation that we're in with those fears and still figure out ways to do the right thing. And, look, like I said, I totally get them. Like I have been banned in multiple states. Um, Iowa, Michigan, Kansas, Texas, Florida, Missouri. I'm sure other states that I don't even know about, Alabama. I'm trying to think of them. My books have been challenged in multiple states, and it's for like the most ridiculous reason, sometimes no reason at all. I understand the fear of getting called names, of getting threats. Um, I've been getting all of those since I started before my first book was even published. When my first book, Love, Hate, and Other Filters, was announced, I was getting essentially death threats on social media and DM to me, and that's why I never have my family on any of my social media accounts anymore. And so I totally get that, and I get the fear of being canceled. And I'm just gonna pause for a second and tell this story because I was just recently canceled and I was going to give a talk. I do get invited to schools to speak. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, those invites have been diminishing. Um, but I was asked to speak at a school recently this year about issues of Islamophobia and how to have community conversations and things that are in a lot of my books. I was excited to do it. I won't name the school. It was a wealthy private school in New York City. I'll say that. And they had invited me, and I agreed. It was like they had asked sort of last minute because of things that were happening, politically in the world. And I was like, okay, great. This is completely something that I love to do, and talking to students and, talking to them about how they can sort of navigate these difficult waters that we're in. And then an hour before I was supposed to do the presentation, my agent received notification that it had been canceled 1 hour before. I of course have had schools cancel on me for snow days and I don't know during COVID, like complete technology failures. But this school canceled without explanation, and my agent tried to get an explanation from them because honestly, an hour before feels kind of tough. And after multiple emails, they said that they would only tell me the reason if I called them, which we were like, no, because you need to put it in writing. They refused. And if you have seen my Instagram, you know that I spoke about it on there. They then used that as an excuse and said that I had not asked permission to post about this situation on my own Instagram account, despite the fact that I did not name the school. And I'm not an employee and I'm not beholden to them at all. But finally, after we had tried to get explanations for them and couldn't, another author who had been to the school sent them an email talking about how distressing the situation was to them because they felt like they had treated me unprofessionally and everything else. And this goes back to that thing that Chris was talking about with community, because sometimes you need your community to step up and speak for you or when you're being silenced. And they actually gave this author they gave her the same line, which was initially saying, okay, you will only tell you the reason if you call us. And the author declined. And so finally the school, and this is after weeks and like dozens and dozens of emails and texts and everything else, the school finally said to this author, okay, well, we canceled Samira's event. I mean, first of all, they claimed that it was postponed, which was totally gaslighting because we actually have the receipts where they canceled it. But they said they canceled Samira's event, my event, because of emergent safety concerns for their students. Now, obviously, we want students to be safe, but I was appearing on Zoom. So I am not sure how my presence on Zoom had created a safety or security concern, but it was so freaking appalling to me. I mean, not only were they trying to gaslight us, but this as a reason just felt so terrible. So I 1,000% get your fear and anger. And like, I understand like that there are often reprisals. I understand that we can lose out on gigs and jobs, but that voice inside of us that's telling us to stand up, that's telling us that these are all wrong, is so important. But it's also important for us to listen to other voices, right? The quieter voices, the voices of our students and like the most marginalized people in society, because they're the ones who need us the most. Despite being canceled, despite being threatened and all these other things, I still realize that I have a lot of power and privilege that so many others don't. And I want to use that. And, you know, I think about all the students and the young people I've met who need to see themselves as heroes on the page. And I believe every child deserves that. I think of all the students, all the kids who need to look into a book and find a piece of themselves because maybe there's nowhere else that they can see their own experience reflected back to them. Maybe there's no place else where they can feel not alone, because sometimes books give us the community and stories give us the community that we might not have in our immediate physical environment. And you know, I think of young people who need stories to figure out who they are, to figure out how to navigate the difficulties in their own lives, because books create a safe space for them to unpack feelings or questions of identity and all of these things. And, you know, those voices of those students, of those young people are the voices that our society ignores the most. And those are the voices that are so often disregarded when, you know, loud, hateful, vitriolic adult voices are shouting out about banning books and supposedly all in the name of protecting kids, when we know 1000% they don't want to protect kids. They want to force their worldview on all of us. And so it's those most marginalized voices that are being forcibly silenced by censorship, by the book bans. It's their stories that are being erased. It's their identities. And as you can tell, I get really like hyped up about this issue. I'm an Aries, so I'm like a natural, I naturally like have a lot of fire, and it's like just the way that I function. Not everyone can function with rage, but I do that, and I channel it into my books. But I want to let's talk a little bit more about book bans. You know, we're in the midst of the most insidious push for book bans that we've experienced, certainly in my lifetimes. And I'm not young, I'm a Gen Xer, as I said. I mean, you can go to the ALA Instagram or Pen America's Instagram and see the thousands of books that have been banned and challenged in school libraries and also public libraries. And I just want to share like some of the reasons given for books being banned, because they're absolutely stunning when we think about them. So, falsifying or rewriting or misconstruing history. Books and stories being morally corrupting to young people, gruesome or violent depictions of war, as if there are any other depictions of war besides ones that are gruesome or violent, just being obscene or pornographic, denigrating, I guess this goes with the first one, denigrating important historical figures, attacking the nation's ideals, because of depictions of sexual deviance, especially references to the fact that transgender, queer, or intersex people exist, and content about race. So this is all familiar. I'm sure all of you have heard all of these things in your districts or have been reading about them in the papers, except these 8 reasons that I just gave you were all the reasons given for book bans in Nazi Germany in 1933. Those, and it's so eerily familiar, right? Those excuses for bans, those reasons for bans given in 1933 in Nazi Germany led to this night of nationwide book burnings across 46 university towns, where we think the estimates are between 25,000 and 40,000 books were burned. books that were banned and then burned for those 8 reasons that I gave you. And honestly, right, it's totally terrifying to compare anything now to what the Nazis were doing, but it's impossible, and it would be totally wrong-headed of us to deny the parallels, because those are some of the same exact reasons that we are being given for book bans now. But personally, I think we're all in the same boat when I say I don't want to be compared. I don't want our society or what's happening now to be in any way Nazi-like. And obviously we have to fight everyone who is imposing all of these on them. But like, one of the things that is the biggest difference between what's happening now with book bans and what the Nazis were doing is that the Nazis actually activated students and collaborating teachers and librarians to instigate the book bans and the book burnings. These 46 sort of giant book burning bonfires that occurred were in university towns for a reason, because the Nazis used propaganda to try to get youth and successfully got youth, and like I said, collaborating teachers and librarians to cull their libraries of their books for all of these reasons. They use them as their book banning army. But now it's mostly parents and other people who are doing this, but teachers, librarians, and students are actually on the front lines of fighting back against the book bans. And that is what gives me an incredible amount of hope. And that's what actually makes me know that we are going to win, that we are not going to go the way of what happened with the Nazis. Because in my next book that's coming out next month, This Book Won't Burn, I have a young person in here who talks about that parallel and says, you know, people who ban books eventually burn books. And that's not where the Nazis stopped, as we all know. But the fact that teachers and librarians and students are on the front lines, the fact that actually the vast majority of Americans believe that book bans are wrong, that censorship is wrong, that's why this time is so different. And that's why we can join together to really fight this. Helen Keller was one of the authors that the Nazis banned, and her books were burned. And in 1933, at the time of these book burnings, she actually wrote an open letter, I think it was published by the AP, to all the students and everyone who were participating in the book burnings. And there was this one line that really struck me, which is, history has taught you nothing if you think you can kill ideas. Because that's what book banners are trying to do today, right? They are trying to kill the idea of a more inclusive and equitable society. They want to erase entire identities by saying that those stories, that those identities don't have a place on our shelves. And why? It's because they want us to submit to their own worldview, this heteronormative worldview that says only some stories of some characters are suitable, are sufficiently tame and American enough to be on shelves. But we are not going to let them ostracize human beings, and we are not going to let them destroy the freedom to read and to think, and we are not going to let them destroy our right to live freely and to exist in our truths and be who we are. And that's where our revolution comes in, right? That's how we are all revolutionaries. And I just want to put this out there because it's so important. Being a revolutionary, revolutionaries are not neutral. I know a lot of people want to say that classrooms and libraries have to be neutral spaces, spaces that are apolitical. But that's impossible. They're not, right? Book bans are political. Book bans are not neutral. When you're denying stories, when you are saying stories by BIPOC authors and about BIPOC characters and about queer and trans characters by queer and trans authors, that stories about sexual assault by survivors, stories of survivors don't belong on our shelves, those people who are banning those books are 1,000% political. They are absolutely not neutral, and we can't be neutral either, because being neutral means that we are essentially standing by and letting it happen. And we are not going to do that. Because when we create spaces for young people where all kids are welcome, just like simply put, that is not a neutral idea. And book banners and these people who are pushing for censorship and for all sorts of noxious laws across the country, they're not being neutral because they're signaling out identities, individuals, stories that they're saying are not okay, are not suitable, they're calling obscene or pornographic. But we are building spaces, are trying to build a world where all kids are welcome. That's not neutral because we're saying that every child deserves this space. So it's not a neutral position, but it's the morally and ethically correct one. And, over time, I guess we've seen that it's the revolutionary one, inclusivity, diversifying our shelves, our classrooms, progressing forward. These are revolutionary ideas and they are absolutely not neutral. And that's why, so many people who benefit from the status quo now are trying to push back against those of us who believe in a more inclusive world for our kids. And look, I get it. It feels exhausting. I haven't given you a magic bullet to try to solve the crises that we're in. But progress is always forward and it's not necessarily easy. And the people who fight progress are the ones who want to turn back the clock, who want to make things great again, as if they were great in times of, of crushing prejudice. But you can't kill ideas and you can't kill our ideas. And we're not going to let them destroy what we're building. So that gets to this, that sort of gets me to my next book, This Book Won't Burn. Getting back to not letting our ideals be destroyed and getting back to the idea of how we turn bad days into good ones. This Book Won't Burn is a story about a young woman who is living in Chicago and who is suffering from this great betrayal because her father has left the family sort of without reason. And her mom moves her and her sister to this small town that is kind of like the opposite of Chicago. And, my main character, Noor, is just trying to keep her head down and make it through to graduation. She can't deal with anything anymore. But when she goes to this small school, she goes into the library, which is her one safe space, and she finds that over 500 books are being pulled from shelves because of a new school district regulation. And she, as much as she wants to just keep her head down and make it through the year, she knows that she can't stay quiet because she is listening once again to that inner voice inside her that's saying, things are really tough for me right now, but I still have to speak up and I still have to figure out a way to build a community that's going to stand with me and together fight this. And this book was, it takes a very long time to publish. So a book. So this story idea actually came out of a conversation I had with a teacher about 2.5, 3 years ago, actually two conversations. And I'm going to just share those two stories with you right now because those two stories from teachers literally inspired this book. So the first story was a teacher, this was about 3 years ago, who had told me she was trying to teach internment in her lit circles in her classroom. And so she put together her purchase order and gave it to the staff member who submits the purchase orders. And when all the books arrived for her lit circles, all of them were there except internment. So she assumed this was just some kind of ordering mistake or some kind of issue. And so she goes to the staff member who does the purchase orders, and the staff member said to her, well, I don't think we should have that book in our school. And this teacher was like, what? I'm the teacher. And, but she was, she was really kind of blindsided by this because this is the staff member putting in the purchase orders. And she was like, I'm not going to put this purchase order in for internment. And so the teacher kind of got scared, thinking like, what's going to happen? Is this person going to elevate this to the superintendent? How can I get this book? Like, what am I supposed to do? She hadn't faced this situation before. So over time, she kept asking the staff member, and this teacher was kind of nervous about elevating it to her. This teacher didn't feel like she had a lot of allies at the school. And so she didn't think that going to the chair or the principal was going to help her situation. In fact, she thought it could potentially hurt her. So she quietly kept pushing for the staff member, the person who sends in the purchase orders. And we all know who that is. It's not somebody who's an educator. Um, and she was just asking him, like, okay, look, I need this book. My lit circles are coming up. Can we just get this, et cetera, like over time, like trying to get her to get this. And finally she asked this staff member, she's like, my God, why won't you just put in the purchase order for this book? And the staff member said to her, I don't know, I guess I'm just prejudiced. And this teacher getting the staff member to admit this is essentially what led to her eventually getting internment for her lit circles. But this story completely blew me away because it's an example of soft banning. It's an example of one individual dictating what an entire grade might be reading, what books might be present in a school based solely on their own bigotry and prejudice. And soft banning is happening all across the country, and it's just another way of making the job of fascists easier. And the second story that was really the one that gave me sort of the foundational question. I was a former teacher, so I still operate with sort of key questions or foundational questions for all of my work, was from a teacher who wanted to, again, teach internment, and she was teaching it in a grade with two other teachers. She was working in a district that was relatively it was a relatively small rural district where almost all of her students were white and all the staff was mostly white. And so she was like, okay, let's bring internment to the sophomore curriculum. And two other teachers said no. And the reason given was because there are no Muslim students in the district. And they didn't think this book was appropriate for the kids. So like the first teacher story I told, this teacher was kind of blown away. And this teacher said to me, look, I am a single mom. I am the sole breadwinner for my kids. And she's like, frankly, I was scared of getting fired. Like, it's my own colleagues who are pushing back against me. And she said, but I wanted to bring your book to our kids precisely for the reason that it's going to open doors for them. It's going to help them see a world beyond the walls of this school. And she said, like, I feel like it's a cop-out because I didn't do more to try to fight for this book. And I honestly was just so nervous about losing my job and what would happen to my family. And then she said to me, Samira, but I want to bring your story and stories like yours to my classroom. So my question to you is, how can I be brave? And that question just gutted me. How can I be brave? And this teacher was being brave just by trying to get my book into this school that was pushing back so hard against her. And that question essentially is what led to this book. Because I always start all my novels, I always say that my story ideas usually come to me in three ways: a character, a conflict, and a question. And that question of how can I be brave is what led to Noor's story. And it in so many ways, it speaks to this idea of revolution too. Like, I always like to say that the through line in all my books are stories of revolutionary girls. It's about young people asking themselves, how can I be brave? And remember when I said listening to sort of our own inner voice and the voices, but also the voices of those who are being marginalized. And I think that's the question we need to ask ourselves. How can I be brave? Like, in the faces of book bans and challenges, how can we use what power and privilege we have for a purpose? How can we use our power and privilege to be brave, to build the community, to build the revolutionary army that's going to fight against these, whether it's on a very small micro level, like the teacher who was getting my book by forcing the staff member to try to confront her own prejudice, or whether it's like in a much bigger way, and like I said, I think this is a time where it can be very scary. Personally, my fear sort of translates into rage, and I use that as sort of my tool. I think we all have to find our own tools, but I wanted to read. I'm running short on time, Chris. No, okay, wait, I'm at the 45-minute mark. See, I talked over beyond my limit. Okay, you know what? I am going to just read this one line really quick. Okay, great. Chris is giving me 5 more minutes. Thanks, guys. I'm sorry that I'm over, but I want to just read this quick passage and then leave you with just a couple practical ideas. So in This Book Won't Burn, the kids are told that they can't read any of these books on campus, and they decide to read some of these books off campus by forming sort of a banned book club. And again, this is inspired from something everywhere that's happening. So many kids are forming banned book clubs, and they take these books that have been pulled from their shelves and read them out loud, or portions of them out loud, to each other. And so Noor is going to read a passage from Anger is a Gift by Marco Shiro. It's a book that's been heavily banned, and I want to just read that passage. I take a deep breath and refocus on the page in front of me. Anger is a Gift by Marco Shiro. It's a novel, but also like a manifesto, and it's pretty badass. I begin reading a short excerpt that struck me this weekend. Anger is a gift. Remember that. You got to grasp onto it, hold it tight, and use it as ammunition. You use that anger to get things done instead of just stewing in it. So Noor takes that as sort of like her battle cry. And that's something that I sort of use as mine also, because we can't just be against book bans in spirit, right? We need to fight them with action. And since I now have only like 2 minutes left, I'm going to quickly run through a list of things that I would love for us to think about doing, or things that we might be able to do in our communities or in our schools to try to fight this. Number one, obviously going to school board meetings, but it can be scary to speak at school board meetings. One of the things that I'm suggesting all over is to work with other teachers and just do read-ins at your school board meetings. There's usually time for public comment. Everyone usually gets 2 or 3 minutes. And one of the things I suggested was just take books that are challenged and read, just standing there, a 2-minute excerpt, because you, during that time, have 2 or 3 minutes of uninterrupted time to speak. And if you're not sure what to say, reading books that have been challenged is great, because that's what book banners are doing. They're taking excerpts that they claim are pornographic or obscene and reading them. And I'd love to just have school board meeting takeovers by community members and do read-ins. Get your unions involved if you can, because you are being attacked. And I think that unions have a very important place in this. If you go to my website, samiraahmed.com, there's actually a list of 3 action items that you can do, which is sign ALA's petition for the Right to Read Act, urging our Congress members to pass that. Find your reps and ask them to co-sponsor the Fight Book Bans Act in Congress. The other big thing I tell everyone is to register, show up, vote in every election. We all know how important school board elections are and library board elections. Of course, those are the ones that have the least voter turnout. And again, this is something that I think you can work on with our unions, which is to try to get voter turnout of those things. I spoke at a district in Niles, Michigan, where the school board had 100% turnover, basically, and the majority became these pro-book banners. I spoke there because 2 of my books were being withheld from shelves. And that election was, one of those seats was won by fewer than 50 votes. So it's so critical. I am on the leadership team of this sort of new organization called Authors Against Book Bans. That's our handle on Instagram. And we're asking everyone to do this, which is Idaho has just passed this totally noxious law where anyone from around the country can challenge a book in an Idaho school. And if your book, and there's almost like a bounty on finding those books, people can get $250 for that book being banned. So anyone in the country. So I'm asking everyone to literally call the governor. Because anyone can do this, you can call the governor, Brad Little, and the phone number is 208-334-2100, or send him an email. Just go to idaho.gov and talk about how terrible this potential law is. It's already passed the state Senate. And again, if you go to Authors Against Book Bans, you'll see it on our Instagram